Welcome to our discussion today, which will cover the last text by Professor JOSÉ CARLOS FERNÁNDEZ that we will address in this lecture, focusing on the doctrine of the heart in Egypt. In my humble opinion, I believe it is one of his best texts. It is divided into two parts, and we have prepared a summary. We will present a summary of both parts today. It is always important to emphasize that this is a summary, a discussion of the main ideas. It does not replace reading the full text, which contains many other details not included here. However, it is essential for us to grasp this concept of the heart, which remains highly significant even in our times. Now, imagine this concept in ancient Egypt. This is an idea that we still seek to represent today. And the heart, if you turn on an AM or FM radio station, I guarantee that many romantic songs talk about the heart, saying the heart is this, the heart is that. However, we usually associate it with something overly sentimental to the point that in our modern times, it has become somewhat cliché, even trivialized, because we have lost the key to its symbolic meaning. The symbolism of the heart is ancient, and as far back as we can trace, its earliest appearances are found precisely in Egypt. Before we delve deeper into this symbolism, I would like to highlight a few key points for you. The symbolism of the heart is closely linked to the idea of the center. This idea is so powerful that it permeates the universe on multiple scales. The idea that things emanate from a center, and from this center, they take shape, they acquire their existence, their manifestation. From a center, they expand, and they manifest. So you can consider an atom with its nucleus, or a galaxy, or a solar system, or a cell, or even a city that is founded, where the first thing that is done is to establish a small church, hold a mass there, and the city expands around that center. Even in a small city today, you will see that it gravitates around this central point, which is the main church square. In other words, the idea of a center, even if unconsciously, is something we are always using. It is always a reference for something that revolves around something fundamental, something essential, and sometimes even something sacred. So, for Egypt, the center indeed represents many important concepts, such as the bridge between heaven and earth, or the place where our voice is most honest, most truthful, where we are truly ourselves. It is where our essence resides and where our meeting point with God is found. So, our entire conversation today will revolve around this idea. Many aspects of Egypt, as well as some references made by Professor JOSÉ CARLOS, and even some additions from various other traditions and authors, all speak about the same concept. In other words, beyond everything, it is ancient and a recurring symbol. It appears in the great civilizations of humanity and in the works of the great thinkers of the past. Shall we begin? Let's embark on this journey to better understand what the Egyptians perceived in the symbolism of the heart. Well, we will notice that in the West, especially from the modern age onward, the heart has been associated with emotions, and I really wouldn't even say feelings in particular. It's that cute little heart from Valentine's Day, linked to passions and emotions. Rarely is it associated with a mature feeling. For example, a long-lasting marriage, even if love is still present and has deepened into something more profound. One would not represent their feelings for another with a little heart. It is already understood as something more emotional rather than truly sentimental. So, in the West, it became very related to that. Now, in Eastern traditions, the heart was not primarily linked to feelings or emotions. Interestingly, it was associated with intelligence, intuition, and wisdom. Let's talk, for example, in India, how this is closely related. The human heart is seen as another form of understanding, almost like a second brain, another center that processes information and provides us with profound insights. It is the seat of the deepest and most truthful discernment. So, right from the start, we can see this distinct difference, although in ancient times, even in the West, this was not always the perspective. Plato himself, let's mention him, did not think in this way. In Christian and Islamic cultures, within theology, it is often reiterated that the heart is the altar of God. God is considered the heart of the world. from which everything emanates and to which everything returns. We will discuss later this characteristic of the divine as a heart. Thus, the altar of God is the heart of man. It is the heart of all things. In other words, it is a divine presence that exists and governs our lives from within our hearts. Within Christianity, we can see the symbolism of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and Mary as a profoundly important symbol. It took me a long time in my life to begin to understand this symbol, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, adorned with thorns. In other words, it is a very powerful symbol, highly significant, even though we often do not take the time to reflect on it. The movement of the heart represents the pulse of the universe. The entire universe is in constant pulsation. Thus, the movement of the heart can be seen as a parallel to the manifested movement of the universe, as if the whole cosmos were a great heart. Later on, we will explore in more detail this vision of the manifested universe represented as a heart. And it is interesting that when you consider that the manifested universe expresses itself and behaves like a heart, when a person finds their own heart, when they learn to listen to it, they establish a channel of communication with all the hearts of the universe, including the heart of the One. Thus, it is said that the wise one is the one who knows how to listen to their heart, because through it you can hear all the hearts of manifestation, including the great heart, from which everything emanates and to which everything returns. That is why a wise person is one of heart, awakened. Continuing. In India, you will see not only in India, but we observed it very strongly there, the symbolism of the heart, how the heart is connected to. It closely resembles an inverted triangle, so often this heart is associated with the feminine, with manifestation. The gods in India, in general, had their Shakti, their feminine counterpart. It is as if the masculine symbolically represents the spirit, and the feminine, the manifestation of that spirit in the manifested universe. And the heart is precisely this command center which connects ideas, essence with existence. So, it is associated especially in our current Western sentimentalist perspective with the impression that the heart represents feelings which are more connected to the feminine, a notion shaped by a set of prejudices. But it is possible that this also carries an echo of ancient traditions. Thus, the Shaktis were associated with this heart of the divine. It is the divine present in manifestation. The Egyptians represented the heart in different ways, but two main representations were a vessel. For those who have seen the scene of the weighing of the deceased's heart in the duet, where the heart of the man is placed on one side of the scale, and on the other, the feather from the head of the goddess Maat, who is the goddess of justice, you will notice that the heart placed there is a vessel with two small handles. It is sometimes represented by this vessel and sometimes by the ibis, an animal with a very thin beak, which is associated with the idea of discernment, as it is capable of selecting, like a pair of tweezers, precisely what it wants to eat. In other words, a capacity for selection, for discernment. This ibis is closely associated with the god, Thoth, who, in turn, is often linked to Hermes, Hermeticism, and the figure considered the founder of the Egyptian Hermes. And this Thoth carries over into other traditions, such as the Greek Hermes and the Roman Mercury. In other words, the human heart is associated with a god who was primarily a communicator between heaven and earth. From the Egyptian Thoth to the Greek Hermes, who wears that winged hat and has wings on his heels, his role was to ascend and descend from heaven to earth and vice versa, connecting both worlds. Take note, if the heart is associated with this figure, it signifies that this is the heart's function to connect these two worlds, to bridge heaven and earth. It is said that the god Ta conceived the world in his heart and then brought it into existence through the power of the word. My goodness, just this alone could be an entire lecture. You have no idea how much we could explore from this. Because the word, remember, fiat lux, in the Bible, the word is the manifestation of something that was previously hidden. I am thinking about something. Then I say, heart. This word, heart, is a visible, audible representation in the world of something that was previously invisible, merely a thought. So, it is said that the Word is the logos of divine thought. The Word represents the creation of the universe. The Creator God is said to have conceived the world in his heart, processed it within, and then manifested it through the Word. Thus, the Word would be the divine logos. And it is also said, according to Professor JOSÉ CARLOS FERNÁNDEZ, that the priests of Anubis, who in Egypt prepared the body for mummification, we are somewhat familiar with this process through history, would remove the organs from the body and place them in canopic jars, but they would not remove the heart. This was because the deceased would need their heart as a witness of their life in the tribunal of Maat. Therefore, the heart was left in the body so that its counterpart, the subtle heart, could be placed on the scales, along with the feather of Maat, each placed on a scale, to measure whether it was heavier or lighter than the heart of Maat. Hearts that were heavier than the feather of justice would have to return to the world. The lighter ones would ascend to Amenti, the land of Ammonius, the land where Osiris resided. The heart was considered the god of each person and a symbol of the presence of divine consciousness. Isn't that interesting? So, the heart is the presence of the divine within you. It is like a precious stone of a level of rarity that does not belong to this world. It is that indissoluble cell as if it were a cell of God. It is the divine that resides in every being of creation. It is your center, it is your heart. Continuing. Plato in the Timaeus. For those who have heard of it, the Timaeus is one of Plato's works. To be honest, it is the most complex of his writings, extremely symbolic, with a style very different from all the others, which are dialogues that can be followed logically. The Timaeus stands out because it is full of symbols, making it incredibly difficult to understand. At a certain point, Plato speaks about the heart in this Timaeus. He says the following: as for the heart, the knot of vessels and the source of blood, which swiftly circulates in all directions, through all the limbs, it was placed, so to speak, in the position of a guardian. In other words, it would be the center, the guard post, communicating with everything through the blood it pumps, recording all the information brought to it by the blood, and it could also transmit its voice to all parts of the body, as long as man gave it a voice in his life. Thus, it serves as the advanced sentinel of a man's identity. There resides his ancient self, there resides his essence. The heart is heard by everything in the body that possesses sensitivity. It is the essence of lived and stored experiences. This is interesting because when the heart is placed on the scales and the duet and weighed alongside the feather of Maat, it is the heart that is weighed. Why? Because all the blood that passes through it tells the story of the entire human body to it. The entire life of that human being would be recorded there. And it is the life of this human being that will be judged, and the heart holds this recorded story within itself. Very similar to what Plato was saying just a moment ago. The life of a man is recorded. Therefore, it is this life that is weighed. It is entirely told within the heart. And soon we will see how the Egyptians believed the story could be sublimated. To make the heart become light, even if life has been filled with many mistakes. This is possible, very similar to what in India they called karmic redemption. It is possible to sublimate the entire experience under one condition, which we will see shortly. This is precisely one of the secrets of the Book of the Dead. How can you ensure that your heart is not stolen from you? In other words, how can you prevent time from stealing your heart? That it does not become mortal, even though it is in the nature of the heart to be mortal. Yes, the physical heart, but not all of its subtle representations. It is said, then, that a heart lighter than the feather of Maat must inevitably be a heart of fire. Imagine for a moment a heart. It is impossible for a human being to have never made a mistake in life, and any mistake makes the heart weigh more than the feather of Maat. So, there is only one way for this heart to ascend to the mind and become lighter than the feather of Maat. It must be a heart of fire. What does that mean? It means that it ignites all the actions of human life and causes everything to be illuminated. All mistakes have served as fuel, so that this heart could be set aflame, but it must have been ignited. We will see that what ignites a heart, what makes it become a heart of fire, is the abstinence from any selfish act. A life fully dedicated to the divine purpose. A life that serves the purpose of the whole, that serves nature, that serves goodness, very similar to the concept of dharma in Indian philosophy, not deviating even a fraction, neither to the left nor to the right of dharma. This heart, in this way, becomes a torch, a heart of fire that burns away all errors, because all of them served to ignite this light. It is like the story of karmic redemption. All the mistakes served to make you aware, to awaken, and to remember who you are. So the mistakes were valid. There is no longer a reason for karmic consequences from mistakes that led humanity to wisdom. It is an identical concept in two traditions, both ancient and beautiful. The Aztecs used to say that the heart is a knot that ties spirit and matter together. Interestingly, they use the same knot imagery that Plato uses, a knot that ties spirit and matter together. Once again, this idea of the heart as a bridge between two worlds. In Tibetan Buddhism, perhaps you are familiar with it, they have a very interesting concept, which Helena Blavatsky portrays in The Voice of the Silence. There is the path of the eye and the path of the heart. The path of the eye is followed by the arhat, while the path of the heart is followed by the bodhisattva. What does the path of the eye mean? It means seeking wisdom to free oneself from the conditions of the world, to escape suffering, in other words, desiring wisdom for selfish reasons. This path of the eye does not go very far. And what is the path of the heart? It is when you seek to advance, but you also wish to bring all of humanity along with you. It moves more slowly, sometimes even stepping back. It endures a little more suffering, as long as it can be a guiding flame for a multitude of human beings following behind you. It is said that this is what Buddha declared at the gates of nirvana. Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, is believed to have spoken these words at the threshold of nirvana. I shall not rest until I see the back of the last person entering nirvana. In other words, if he is to see the back of the last person, then the last one will be himself, even though he could have been among the first. This is the path of the heart. It is a path that eradicates all forms of selfishness. It makes a person feel that their heart and the heart of the universe are one and the same. Therefore, it no longer beats just for a single body. The body becomes merely a tool, while the heart beats for the universe. The heart. As understood in the Egyptian tradition, once again, they have a very interesting phrase here, which states the following: even ignorance is preferable to the wisdom of the mind if the latter does not produce the wisdom of the soul. In other words, if you do not possess the wisdom of the soul, the wisdom of the mind will become a burden. If you have become a dead heart, a heart of stone, the wisdom of the mind will work entirely in favor of selfishness, because it is the awakened heart that moderates your selfishness. A heart that has been so neglected that it withers and dies leaves you completely ensnared by the traps of selfishness. Therefore, this knowledge will only serve to strengthen selfishness. Plato had a very similar phrase. Considering that Greece was greatly influenced by Egypt, it is very likely that this idea came from the same source. He said that absolute ignorance is preferable to knowledge in the wrong hands. Absolute ignorance is better than knowledge that serves division, that fosters separation rather than unity. Consider that, for Plato, the good is precisely that which unites, which restores unity within multiplicity. In other words, that which follows the course of the universe. As Pythagoras used to say, it begins with 1 and ends with 10. 1 plus 0 returning to 1 again. Everything is born from unity, and everything returns to unity. The heart is the sun within man, and the sun is the heart of the system. A beautiful play on words that represents a profound reality. It is our sun. From it emanates light, from it emanates life, from it emanates sustenance. And the sun fulfills the same role within the solar system. Perhaps the heart of the galaxy does the same within this nest of galaxies, this vast wall. Within this supercluster, or even beyond, perhaps all of them are nourished by a heart. Plato once said that the circumference is the most perfect of shapes because all points are equidistant from its heart, its center. There are torch men and there are stone men. Torch men are those whose hearts are awakened. Therefore, they are so sensitive that everything that passes through them is recorded. And they measure and weigh everything with the feather of Mott. And they see if things are in their rightful place, if they can help guide them back to where they belong. The truly awakened heart weighs things with the feather of Mott and always works for justice, always remains sensitive to restoring harmony to the extent of its possibilities, within the limits of its capabilities. Whereas the heart of stone belongs to the person who has ignored their own heart for so long. Will elaborate on this later because it withers, it dries up, becoming a rock within the heart of a person. And that voice becomes insensitive. It becomes a mere plaything in the hands of selfishness, as we have already mentioned. According to Professor JOSÉ CARLOS FERNÁNDEZ, he tells us about an amulet that existed in Egypt, shaped like a heart. Not a little heart like those used by lovers, because that wasn't known back then, folks. It was an actual organic heart. This heart-shaped amulet was adorned with numerous symbols and deities that represented certain virtues. Wisdom, beauty, rebirth, in other words, like a phoenix. The heart of fire is like a phoenix, the memory of what is essential, the mirror of God. In other words, as if it were a small God residing within us at all times, reflecting the greatness and attributes of the great God. That is why the voice of the heart is something sacred, something metaphysical. It is the voice of purity, of identity, of our clear values, which call upon us to take a humane stance in life. Human responses to life. And if you do not respond, if you do not give it an answer, it aches until the point it withers. And it falls silent, and it falls silent forever. Therefore, if your heart still aches, celebrate. It still has hope in you. Pliny in Rome speaks of Mercury, the god. Roman Mercury was the ruler of words and concepts of the heart. As I have already mentioned to you, Mercury is the same as Hermes, who was represented by the ibis. In other words, he is the one who governs the words and concepts of the heart. It is said that the only true words are the sacred words, and eros logos, the sacred word, which is spoken from the heart. It is breathed into our ears and onto our lips through the heart. If they are not trivial words, empty words, as Buddhism says, they bring no comfort to those who hear them. Oropoyo, a Greek priest from the 3rd century AD, wrote a work called Hieroglyphica. It was one of the first attempts to interpret Egyptian hieroglyphs. And he states the following, that the heart was the first letter of the Egyptian alphabet, and it was represented as an ibis. This is quite interesting. In other words, for them, the ibis actually, the god Thoth, was considered the creator of Egyptian writing. So all writing was dedicated to him, with its first letter being the ibis, according to this author. Plutarch says more or less the same thing. Our Plutarch from the Platonic Academy, who lived between 40 and 120 AD. He states that from Thoth came intelligence and memory, and that true knowledge emanated from the heart. More or less the same idea, just to provide a historical overview. Now, let's move on to the Maxims of Ptolemy. I intend to comment on this book for you on what remains of it. Some fragments still exist today. It is magnificent. It is difficult to comment on a book like this because there is not a single phrase you can disregard. They are all very beautiful. Ptolemy, this Egyptian vizier who lived around the end of the 25th century BC, that left behind a series of wonderful sayings. The heart is the true measure that holds the key to morality. In other words, that which you can place before your heart without shame and without staining it hot is morality. Bathe your thoughts, words, and actions in the waters of the heart. The human heart is the greatest mystery of the universe. In other words, when you place thoughts, words, and actions before your heart, if you do not cloud its mirror, that is morality, It is morality from a timeless perspective, not just from the viewpoint of this civilization. Not living in accordance with the heart causes the heart to disappear. In other words, a Teep in the 25th century BCE already stated that the heart, after being ignored for so long, eventually falls silent forever, as if it had died. And what remains is a body without a center. And if it has no center, that body will follow any center that its environment imposes, that its surroundings suggest. It becomes a leaf in the wind. No gift is greater than the heart. The heart is reached by those whose words do not revolve selfishly around themselves. Stop and take notice, everyone. I have suggested this exercise before in different words, in other lectures, pardon me. And I often practice it myself. As you walk down the street, now and then you catch snippets of conversation here and there. When you're in a park, you overhear the conversations of people around you. In general, these conversations tend to focus selfishly on talking about someone. Words are spoken to impose your point of view on others, usually Manuel Bandera, and not assessing it as a virtue. More often than not, they are negative judgments, usually criticisms. In other words, our words are so self-centered, so focused on projecting our small self, on the projection of our personality. And by diminishing others, these conversations become entirely personal and selfish. He says, "These are not words, they are mere noise. True words are those completely devoid of selfishness, aimed at guiding humanity along the path of Horus. That is the path that unites heaven and earth." There is an Indian concept, which I have mentioned to you many times in other lectures, but it is worth repeating here the concept of the Socratic. It is as if all human beings were pearls, and a single silver thread passed through each one of them. In fact, not only human beings, but all beings in the manifested universe. That is our essence, which is our heart. Would not be just ours, but a continuous thread that passes through all beings. It is as if my heart, your heart, my heart. The entire universe were episodes of this thread, this Socratic, that runs through the whole universe. As if our heart were merely the insertion point of the silver cord of the divine. It is not just ours. And when we listen to our heart, when we hear its mysteries, we find fraternity as a concrete necessity. It is no longer possible to ignore the countless other hearts that are part of mine. The heart goes astray when it listens to its own desires. It must distance itself from the calls of the flesh. And so, like Teep, once again, in other words, it becomes scattered. When a human being does not learn to dive into their heart, to deepen its voice, the heart's energy becomes dispersed. Instead of listening to the body as a whole, to the notes voices of the heavens and the earth, one may begin to focus only on the voices of the human being's inner depths, on their viscera, their core, which is everything related to survival. The instinct for survival, the instinct to perpetuate the species with the greatest possible comfort and nothing more. This is a heart that has been emptied, stripped of its essence, violated. A heart on the brink of death or even already dead. Instincts take the place of the heart and begin to dictate their maxims as the total and absolute meaning of life. A heart set aflame makes the paths of the divine our own. Another beautiful Egyptian phrase as well. In other words, a heart set aflame dissolves separateness, and you begin to see the path of the divine, the path of leading all beings toward unity as your own path, your own interest. The objective of the whole becomes your objective. You become an integral part of the whole, fully aware of its objectives. Just as my hand works for the well-being of my body, just as each of my cells should work for the well-being of my body, so too is a man whose heart has awakened. The paths of the divine, the paths of the body, are also the paths of the cell. When that cell has its heart awakened, a cell that has lost this center, lost this essence, lost its memory and identity, may begin to work against the body. Do you realize that this is the dissolution of the boundaries of what in Tibet is called the heresy of separateness. I always use an example that is not mine, but one from Professor Jorge Angel Lavraga, the founder of New Acropolis, in which he says, imagine looking at the sand on a beach where you run your finger through it and create a groove. You run your finger again and create another groove. You say, there are two grooves, two beings. But soon the wind blows and everything becomes just sand again. We are like theta groove etched in the sands of time, momentarily. But soon the wind passes and we return to what we have always been, a part of unity. All separateness is an illusion, and the heart knows this. If you learn to dive into it, the heart knows this, and it will communicate to you the divine purpose. As your purpose above, beyond, and almost exclusive, rising above any selfish goal, and even capable of dissolving these selfish aims through fire. Once again, another beautiful Egyptian teaching. The greedy lack rest. They do not let their soul rest in life or beyond, distancing themselves from all true riches. In other words, the greedy person is distanced from everything that is truly good. He chases after shadows. He flees from his true self and becomes a slave to the present moment. Notice how interesting this is, because the greedy person is pursuing things he will never truly have, as they do not exist. They are mere shadows. And in doing so, he gives up the only thing that could truly belong to him. The heart and all its voices are real. The heart speaks of justice. If you are just, who can take that away from you? The heart speaks of fraternity. If you are fraternal, who can take that away from you? Now, everything that does not truly belong to you can be taken from you, even this physical body. One day, it will be gone. It is matter that does not belong to us. It belongs to nature. Thus, the greedy person, in chasing shadows, gives up what is real. He gives up what is real in the name of shadows. And he does not find peace because he is a seeker of things he never truly finds, or when he does, he never retains them. Because they disappear, slipping through his finger, they are not real. Therefore, he lives in anguish and finds no peace, neither in this world nor in any other. And the one who flees from his old self, which is, in truth, his eternal being, becomes a slave to the present moment. By fleeing from himself, he escapes the only true freedom possible, which is through his heart. He can be in the heavens, on the earth, and in the hearts of all being, in other words, the greatest freedom possible. By alienating ourselves from him, we become slaves to circumstances. Look at how beautiful this phrase is. It seems to me that this is from the book of the sarcophagi. And it says the following: what is violent lacks a heart. He who is frivolous of heart will not establish a dwelling. He has no center, no identity. The first thing a violent person violates is his own heart. The first victim of the violent is his own heart. This wounded heart keeps losing more and more. Its voice, its ability to express itself, its ability to be present in our daily lives, guiding our actions. We will talk about this in just a moment. How the voice of the heart exists within us. It is not the voice of passions. It has nothing to do with that, but rather a deep consciousness that constantly signals the right path for our lives. With every act of violence it endures, the more wounded it becomes, the quieter it grows, losing its voice. At a certain point, you no longer hear it. You no longer hear the voice of silence. The heart, in the form of a vessel, do you remember? That, when weighed against the feather of Maat, brings balance to justice, because the feather of Maat is the goddess of justice. The 7 sages of Greece, in those Delphic maxims attributed to them, said, nothing in excess. Do you see how balance, the absence of excess, the center, is the voice of the heart? To seek essence, to seek balance, to seek justice, to seek each thing in its rightful place. In India, this center of balance was represented as sattva and also as retention. For those familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, the entire book speaks about retention. In the Buddhist tradition, in the Dhammapada, it is the middle path, the center, the heart of your life. In the Hebrew Talmud, it is said, if your heart runs, Make it return to its place. In other words, the heart must be at the center, like a sentinel, like the one who marks the right path, the straight direction, the human path that awaits you. Confucius says something else very interesting. The heart of the wise, like a mirror, must reflect everything without, however, being tainted. In other words, it perceives the needs of the entire body without, however, neglecting the needs of the soul. It sees all the needs of the earth without failing to feel the needs of heaven. In other words, it is your essence, but it is capable of seeing your entire context, recording your whole history, without becoming clouded, without becoming entangled. When your heart begins to drift out of place and become entangled with things, it means that it is seriously wounded, losing its nature, its identity. It is a heart that has been deeply mistreated and, therefore, is becoming insensitive. In the Book of the Dead, that book of the hidden abode, which we know as the Egyptian Book of the Dead, there are a series of phrases and chapters dedicated to the idea of the heart. Professor JOSÉ Carlos lists some of them. Shall we explore them? A human being must be built from the heart. Do you remember the city that is built around the main church? All things radiate from the center. At the center, they carry a sacred essence, which declares the purpose for which they were built. What is the spirit of that city? What purpose does it serve? The same applies to human beings. A person is built from their heart. And it is in the heart that one's identity resides, the purpose of their existence, and the direction they must follow to rediscover themselves. In the heart lies the key to luminous states of consciousness. I don't know if you have ever noticed this, but when we feel in some way that our heart is heavy, perhaps due to a mistake or something that does not align with what we consider noble, just, and good, with the best we have ever experienced at it is difficult to find great inspiration. I enjoy writing poems from time to time. When my heart is heavy, my inspiration is non-existent. It feels like there is no meaningful communication, nothing truly valid. No word seems worth saying when your heart is clouded. The genuine word, the profound word that brings comfort to those who hear it, becomes completely absent when your heart closes its doors, mourning a day that lacked humanity. Observe this. Learn to experiment. These are not things from another world, but from this very one. How can we free the heart from the devouring claws of time and its rulers? This is one of the questions posed in the Book of the Dead. How can the heart be elevated so that it is not imprisoned by time, not caught in its claws, not consumed by it? The heart is judged because it records the footprints of man on the earth, as we have already mentioned. These are some of the teachings found in this collection of papyri that we call the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Once again, a beautiful Egyptian phrase. Your heart belongs to a God who has guided you to this body. You can renew it by uniting yourself with the God who dwells within it. God renews your heart. The heart renews your life, and a renewed life purifies the body. If you abandon your heart, it will become a corpse. In other words, it falls silent, and the flow of life is broken, and you merely survive, no longer live. Horus, as I mentioned to you, dwells in the heart. And he is the one who bridges the world of Isis and Osiris in the lover, the one who is capable of battling the shadows, Set, the one who is a communicator between heaven and earth, who stands in the middle of the path. Horus resides in the heart of beings, precisely as this intermediary, this center between all worlds. The heart is important, then, for the Egyptians, because it is the center of man. It inscribes, marks upon the earth the designs of heaven, and carries the voices of the earth to the heavens. In other words, he is a communicator. He connects these two worlds. He gathers the best of the earth and inscribes upon it the designs of heaven. Confucius speaks a lot about this as well. It is truly beautiful. The decrees of heaven are written on earth by those who have a pure heart, by those who listen to the voices of their heart. because otherwise no decree of heaven would be written on earth if it did not pass through the heart of man. In other words, there is much waiting to be born through our hearts. Many things are meant to be imprinted upon the earth through our hearts. Only the actions that heaven abhors can harm the heart. True pain is that which damages the heart. And there is an Egyptian phrase that Professor JOSÉ CARLOS FERNÁNDEZ mentions. Let no violence be done to me, which is the heart speaking. Do not be violent with me, for that is the worst of all pains. It is a pain that reduces a man to a mere walking corpse. A body without a heart is a body without purpose. It is a body without identity, a mere plaything. Understand this idea. The actions that heaven abhors are the ones that damage the heart. This is a very real experience, everyone. We all go through it. It is important that you focus your attention and recognize it. Sometimes, before going to sleep, you feel your heart, your physical heart, truly aching. The impression I get is as if a pin were stuck in that heart. Something that hurts, that bothers me. And when you consult your mind, it tells you, no, you had a perfect day. You didn't do anything wrong. Wow, you did everything just right. You passed by people, greeted them, did everything correctly. You were kind to everyone. Then you tell your mind to be quiet and ask your heart, what is it? If you place yourself before it as if before a temple and ask what happened, it's astonishing because it takes you exactly to the moment when you formally greeted someone. Yes, a person, but you didn't look into their eyes. If you had looked, you would have realized that they needed more than just a formal greeting. They needed you, they needed attention, they needed care. And you ignored it out of convenience, haste, or inattention, whatever the reason may be. What the mind did not register remains embedded in your heart like a thorn. There is only one way to ease this pain. It is to quiet the mind, stand before it and say, I see it, I acknowledge it, I commit myself. I will fight against this from now on. It is very interesting because this commitment before the heart is as if someone came and removed that thorn. The pain disappears immediately. Try this experience. Placing yourself before the heart is like standing at the door of a temple, one that connects to many, many sanctuaries, as if you were standing before the sacred. Not just the sacred within you, but the sacred in the universe, the mystery of the universe. And it signals when it is still alive. It signals that your day was not aligned with the maxims of the whole, with the maxims of the one, with the path you must follow, which is the path of the one. It hurts, and it hurts physically. It is important that you learn to recognize this. Every night, reflect on your day and ask your heart, how was it? And if it hurts, it is a message, a sign that it has something to tell you. If you ask, it will show you where you have disregarded the codes of the heart, the protocols of your heart. There is a text from the sarcophagi where an Egyptian god speaks. I placed your heart within your body for you, so that you may remember what you have forgotten. This is very beautiful, everyone. A divine being within this traditional polytheistic tradition, meaning it was a god says, I placed your heart within your chest so that you may remember who you are. If you go within, you will find your ancient self, your eternal self, your true identity. Call to memory. Within you, there exists that divine spark, which is your true identity, your inner name. Within your heart, there is something divinia, a spark of God. This is the mission you came to fulfill in the world, and it is the duty you owe to the whole. It is the sacred word, the hieros logos, that you must inscribe upon the earth, upon matter, so that others may read it through you. This is the purpose of the heart. It carries the fundamental message. Preserves your inner name, it safeguards the sacred word. At a certain point in that same text from the sarcophagi, it is said, so that your heart may not be taken away. This is also frequently mentioned in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Beware that your heart is not taken away. Take note, the physical heart will be taken by matter because it is made of matter. But there exists a more subtle heart, one that lies behind the physical heart. It is the memory of this subtle heart that they do not want to be taken away. In other words, that you lose everything you have stored throughout life if you have stored anything at all. Notice that in the Book of the Dead, there is no concern with the memory of the head, only with the memory of the heart. Why is that? The memory of the head stores the trivial and superficial aspects of life, things that sometimes do not even require death to be forgotten. They fade even during life itself. You forget. The memories of the heart preserve those seeds of reality, of eternity, that you have gathered throughout life. In other words, they carry the most meaningful fruits of your life, that which truly contributed to your growth and to the world. That is, the Book of the Dead, as well as the coffin texts, do not concern themselves much with the memory of the head, but they strongly emphasize the need to protect the memory of the heart, which holds the true essence of your life. Once again, in the coffin texts, Professor José Carlos cites a beautiful passage. This text is filled with beautiful passages. No spirit shall seize my heart, for my God has an open path. To him and in him it dwells, and soon you, celestial spirits, shall restore this heart with you to the places of eternal joy. Look closely, my God has an open path to him, and in him it dwells. Be careful, let's understand this more deeply. It's not simply that God dwells in my heart because I love him and think about him all the time. It is much more than that. My heart would be a cell of the divine itself, a part of him embedded within me. That Osiris who was torn apart, with his pieces scattered to all corners of the world as fragment of the divine embedded in my chest, this precious jewel. And when I bring it to Iona, it becomes the brightest, the most significant, and it gives meaning to my entire life. God dwells in my heart because my heart is a part of him, as if it were a small fragment of a great diamond. Do not let your heart falter. This is what the Papyrus of Ani says, one of the many papyri that make up the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Do not let your heart falter. If you can still hear its voice, learn to nurture it more and more by listening attentively, putting it into practice, engaging in dialogue with this voice, and asking what it wants to tell you. Strive to visualize, realizing that through this voice you gain much deeper understanding of yourself, as well as of all the people and things you interact with, because the profound connects with the profound, while the superficial connects with the superficial. Recognize that through this voice, your words gain meaning, becoming constructive, turning into valuable messages, becoming fragments of truth, small pieces of reality in a world of illusions. Do not let your life come to an end without having listened to your heart, which is the very core of your existence. I recall once again an episode that I often share in many lectures. I think it is interesting to mention it here. When the Greeks fought against the Persians, despite being vastly outnumbered, in the Battle of Marathon, they miraculously managed to achieve victory. Their main concern was ensuring that someone would reach Athens before sunset on the third day. They had agreed with the Athenians that if they did not receive a message of victory by sunset on the third day, they should destroy the city to prevent it from being desecrated by the Persians. And they won somehow against all odds. They then chose a runner, much like a modern-day athlete, named Phidippides, and told him, "Go, run to the Athenians and tell them we have won." And Phidippides, exhausted, almost delirious, starts running, because if he wasn't fast enough, Athens would be destroyed. When he reaches Athens, he has just enough breath to say a single word. Night came, we won, and he fell dead. And so, Athens was preserved with all its beauty, with all its temples. Perhaps there is also a nenekamen that each of us must proclaim. Our heart holds onto this word. We cannot fall before this word is spoken. Therefore, let us not allow our hearts to falter. Not before we have delivered its message to the world, and not before we have written the sacred word it entrusted to us upon the sands of time and matter, so that others, through our lives, may also awaken their own hearts. That is basically it. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we have any questions. Do we? All right, let's move on to the questions. Yes, Egypt was seeking wisdom. The weight of the deceased's heart made this very clear. Those who did not have a heart lighter than the feather of Mot would return to the world. They were devoured by a monster with the body of a lion and the head of a crocodile, and they were consumed by this creature. Then they returned to live on earth. For a very simple reason. Their heart contained only things of the earth. There was no reason to send a heavy heart, full of material things, to a world where nothing material exists. In other words, you walk toward where your heart points. So they worked with the idea of reincarnation. It is not, as some think, exclusive to India. It seems that several civilizations held this belief. If time had hardened your heart, you wouldn't even ask that question. When it truly hardens, a person no longer believes in anything and is no longer capable of feeling enthusiasm for anything, except for personal advantages obtained at any cost. This is a hardening that is difficult to reverse, and I truly don't know how. There is a certain passage from the Egyptian tradition itself that speaks about this, that Sekhmet, the goddess Iona, with her claws, would be capable of recovering this heart. But I don't really know this in depth, nor do I fully understand it, so I wouldn't be able to speak on it. But in general, who feels a thirst, an anguish, a pain, a desire to contribute, or an interest in this kind of subject. That interest that awakened in you was your heart. Once it has turned to stone, then you are talking about a person who is very, very, very insensitive to the pain of others. Almost like a psychopath, as Dr. Anna Beatriz also says. Completely insensitive to the pain of others, and that is truly very complicated. We will have to understand the mysteries of Sekhmet, which are not easy to grasp. It is interesting because it has always fascinated people. It seems that we intuitively sense it, and intuition is something that belongs to the heart. Forgive me. We intuit that there was something there, something we do not fully understand, but that is valuable and worth knowing. It is said that, in the Middle Ages, whenever a strange person appeared around the feudal land, someone who seemed like a magician or something similar, people would say that they came from Egypt. Even if it was out of fear, there has always been an association between Egypt and mysteries, with profound knowledge that we no longer possess. There is only one explanation for this. There must be something intuitive that tells us there was something there that, at some point, we need to recover. And there is no rational explanation for it. This mystery, this fascination that profound things evoke in people when they are overwhelmed by superficialities, is the voice of the heart. Juliana, what is the right approach to follow, reason or the heart? Both, but you must consider that reason, logic, is fundamental. As Epictetus said, protect your reason, and it will protect you. However, reason must be guided by the principles of the heart. And reason, when guided by the impulses of the gut, it becomes a machine serving destruction, manipulation, and the exploitation of everything. Reason is logic, it concatenates arguments, but the direction of reason is not its own. It has to come from outside. In other words, it either comes from the heart or from the gut. I give you something and it makes you weigh this object for me. You will use a whole system of measurements, and this metric system you apply is pure reason. But the object you are going to weigh was a decision, yours or mine, since I gave it to you. Whether it is a flower or manure. It was not your mathematics that decided. It was the one who gave you the object to be weighed. Therefore, reason is fundamental, but it must be guided by the principles of the heart. Otherwise, it becomes merely instrumental, serving any purpose, whether good or bad. Do not think that the great tyrants of history, the great genocidal leaders, were unfamiliar with logic because if they had not known it, they would not have caused the destruction they did. Logic is instrumental. It is absolutely necessary, but it must be guided by the principles of the heart. It is the heart that provides direction. Yes, like, share, and what else? Subscribe. That's right. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. This is very important to us, and it helps us reach more people. Here is an interesting fact I'd like to share with you. Our YouTube channel is entirely organic. Up until now, we have never paid for advertisements on that channel. Therefore, it grows thanks to your support, your encouragement, and the sharing you do. So, we rely heavily on you to help this message reach more people, and perhaps even touch other hearts. I hope you can contribute. A warm hug, and good night to everyone.